Welcome to Sales and Marketing Talk Show. Today I have a special guest all the way from California, Andy Raskin. And Andy is an expert on storytelling and strategic narrative. And he's been helping companies like Salesforce, Uber, Intel, and many more. And today we'll be talking about storytelling for success. And I think storytelling is a great subject that we haven't talked yet on this show. But Andy, could you open up a little bit about like what stories means? I think Ben Horowitz said it great. The company story is the company strategy. But can you open up that a little bit more, like an introduction to the subject that we are talking today?
Yeah. Well, first of all, great to talk with you, Samali. And yeah, that is a great quote. That quote is, I'm not sure if you saw it, it's on the top of my website because I think it really captures everything that I believe and is really the spirit behind all the work that I do. When I was learning about business, sales, pitching, I always saw the story as a kind of wrapping paper. Like the product is really the main thing that we're building. That's the important thing. That's almost kind of like a given. And then the story is the kind of like to make it look good on the shelf. So it's going to make it presentable. And what this is saying, what Ben Horowitz was saying, and which is very well expressed, this realization I was coming to was that it's almost the opposite, that really what people are buying is the story. And, we can talk about what we mean by that, but, and the product and everything else is a kind of prop for making the story come true. A very important prop, obviously. One of the great experiences I've had is some great product people who have been on the teams I've worked with have said, well, when we first started doing this, I didn't really know why you wanted me to be on the team. And because, this is a sales and marketing thing. And afterwards coming to me and saying, hey, now that we have this narrative straight, like this is the North Star for everything that I'm building. And in some cases, some of those product people have gone on to become CEOs and then work with me to build the narrative for their companies. Yeah, I really believe this, that the narrative is really the kind of guiding North Star for everything that the company does.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. And while I was doing like a research for this episode, I found an article called The Greatest Sales Deck I've Ever Seen. And I think there was a great framework of 5 different steps that like companies and salespeople should do while telling stories. And today we will be going through those 5 steps. But I think one very interesting thing on that thing was that you said that successful sales decks follow the same narrative structure as epic films and fairy tales. Could you like open up why is that and why that kind of sales decks and stories works for us?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, if you think about it, let's take films. Every great film is, in a way, a pitch, or at least it starts out with a pitch. The pitch, in the context of the story, is usually a pitch to that main character to usually leave some kind of comfort zone they're in and go and do something different. Whether that's get into a relationship, which is like a love story, or go out on some, dangerous quest, like epic, like Star Wars. And, the other thing that happens, like in a lot of movies, is that that main character initially refuses. Like they initially, like, oh, you know what? I think I'm okay. Luke in Star Wars, when Obi-Wan first comes to Luke, Luke's been kind of belly aching. Hey, I don't really want to I don't want to sit around doing chores. I want to go out and have adventure. And so Obi-Wan says, let's go. Let's do everything that, let's do that. And initially, Luke actually says no. And so there's this very close correspondence to the sales, to what happens in sales conversations. The prospects, oh, we want to be really innovative and all this. And then, they actually demur and are reluctant. And so there's a really similar dynamic that happens. And I found that, the sales deck you're talking about, for the article you're talking about, the greatest sales deck I've ever seen, is about the sales deck of a company called Zuora that had an IPO last year and has become very successful since then. What was really interesting to me was when I first found is that they really followed this structure of movies.
Great, and I think those are the reasons why they work. And while I read through the article, I really understand that one better. And as said, today we'll be going through the 5 steps you can find from there. And if we think about like sales decks and companies telling their stories, I think many salespeople still today start off their presentation by talking about their product or their investors or their clients or anything about yourself, basically. But what you suggest on the article was that you should start off by naming a big relevant change in the world. So could you open up, what do you mean by this?
Yeah, so, the example that you're talking about with Zuora. So Zuora sells software that helps you do like subscription billing. And when Zuora was first starting, they came up with this phrase, the subscription economy, that we now live in a subscription economy. And this was the kind of, this was the start of their sales deck. And not only their sales deck, but this was the first thing that like the CEO would say when he went on TV. It was the first thing that you'd hear, like almost all of their content was really about, hey, the world has shifted. It used to be we would buy things, people wanted to buy and own things, and now they want to subscribe to the services of those things. And this shift is a way for you to say to the prospect, hey, you're not wrong. Like if you just say like, hey, you have a problem and I have the solution, like you're kind of telling them they're wrong. Like, hey, and people tend to get very defensive with that. The other issue, if you just tell them they have a problem, maybe they don't really see the problem yet, or maybe you may have to talk to people higher up in the organization who are removed from the problem, so they don't really experience it as like, oh, I'm in pain. Like we talk about sell to pain or list up the pain points. And a lot of the people we're selling to, like, they're not really in pain, like they're doing okay. And so this is a way to say, hey, what you were doing was fine back then, but now because the world has shifted, there's kind of a new game. I've come to now talk about this shift as there was an old game and there's a new game. So I actually wrote another post called to create a category, name the new game. And this is how I like to think about it. So there was an old game called transactions. There's a new game called subscription. And this really does have a parallel in movies. There's this moment in the beginning of a lot of films where something happens that kind of jolts the main character out of their comfort zone. They can't resist any longer. So in Star Wars, the Empire attacks his family, and there's it really has nothing to go back to anymore.
Yeah, I think those are like great ideas, and the thing you said or told about like talking about customers' problems, I think that is like very important for companies and salespeople and for marketing people as well to understand. Since I think that's another way. If you don't talk about yourself, then many salespeople talk about their customers' problem, and I think many times there is a slide on your sales deck that says that, hey, here's your problems or challenges. So I think this is a better way of doing that. Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, then to step number 2, I really like this one. You talk about that, you show that there will be winners and losers, and I think actually many organizations have been starting to use this now when there's the COVID situation going on, that there will be winners and losers from this situation, but I think you can use it in every other situation as well. So could you open up like this a little bit more?
Yeah, well, this shift we're talking about, it really, who cares unless it's creating stakes, meaning some kind of payoff, and meaning in a positive way potentially, and a negative way potentially. So the only reason that in Star Wars that Empire attack is emotional is because now Luke's parents are dead. And now he has to go, and he's been hearing about these Jedi, these kind of winners, and now he gets to kind of join their club. And in the same way, if there aren't stakes, if the payoff isn't really clear in some kind of life and death version, it doesn't always have to literally be life and death, but often it is, then there's no urgency. People, a lot of people talk about, well, creating urgency or making it emotional. And I was always very frustrated because there was never a definition of what that meant. And my attempt to define it is this, to say that, hey, it's emotional if the buyer sees the stakes, if they see that this shift in the world has created a new situation where they're not going to just be okay. Like they're probably be dead, but there's this other path to kind of to thriving that we're also putting out there, and they have to see both of those.
Yeah, and I think the better way is to find the like thriving place. And if we talk about that place, the term you use is the promised land. So that's like the place you want your customers to go. And at this stage of like storytelling, you shouldn't yet tell them like how you are going there, but you should rather give them the picture of the promised land. And how do you do that?
Yeah, the way, again, I started to use, I found this term promised land to be, people interpret it in a lot of different ways, like, oh, it's about the benefits, or it's about this or that. And it wasn't quite what I was aiming for. So I started using a little bit different language, this old game, new game language. And so if we have this new game that the winners are playing, then how do you win that game? What is the finish line of that game? And so what this is really about is naming kind of like the buyer mission statement. With Zuora, they said, hey, we live in a subscription economy, and they did different versions of this over the years, but one of the versions was just right on the front of their website, turn your customers into subscribers. And so if you can turn your customers into subscribers, that's winning. And that's you've won, happily ever after. This is a very difficult thing to do because, as you can imagine, we always have to make a trade-off between something very high level and something more high level and vague, and low level but concrete. So Zuora could have said, make more money, which we all can say, but it's very vague. and it doesn't really serve well as it doesn't do good narrative work. On the other hand, they could have said, have a system that allows you to send out monthly bills, and that's kind of too concrete. So we're always looking for some kind of Goldilocks place in the middle that feels aspirational enough, but at the same time is also concrete.
Yeah, and I think one very important thing on this subject actually is that when you are like selling your company story or presenting your sales deck inside a company, what normally happens there is that after that meeting, some other guy from the company or someone who was in the meeting comes to like ask that, what do those guys do again? And I think that if you have a great story, it's way easier for other people to like sell your idea, sell your product in-house as well. So any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I hear this over and over again. Of course, I saw this quote on LinkedIn. Someone put it this way. I think she said, some of the most important selling that happens is going to happen when you're not in the room. And it's going to happen when the person you were in the room with starts pitching to the people above them. And do you want to leave those people on their own, or do you want to feed them with what's the bigger story about why this matters? And again, and I hear time and again that this structure, particularly around this shift in the world, winners and losers, and the kind of object of the new game, this promised land thing, that if we can give them that it makes it much easier for them to sell up, because then they have the story about why this matters. Just as you said.
Yeah, great. And then to step number 4, which is like you should introduce your features as magic gifts for overcoming obstacles to the promised land. So basically, I think here the big picture is really to position yourself in the context of transactioning from the old world, as you said, to the new world. Well, what is like the best way of doing that one? Can you like share some examples on this?
Yeah, well, if moving from the old world to the new world is easy, then nobody needs you. Nobody needs what you're selling. So it better be hard. And of course, I'm sure it is, because you're selling that thing, and let's just assume that. And so often I'll do a slide like this that's basically, so okay, if the object of the new game is turn your customers into subscribers, well, why is that so hard? Like, what is hard about that? And we'll list up I call the monsters. What are the reasons why moving to a subscription model is going to be really tough? So Zuora did this in that post I shared they basically said, look at all the things you're going to have to track if you're a subscription business. So you're going to have to track like not only things like monthly usage and payment plans and all the nuts and bolts, the mechanics of it, but also preferences, recommendations, usage patterns, all this stuff if you're going to really maximize the lifetime value of your customer. And what they're really saying there is, hey, you're not going to be able to do that with your ERP system. And that was, I think, really genius about Zuora. They were positioning against ERP, but they didn't just say, hey, here's why we're better than an ERP system. It came at it a completely different way, which is they said, here's the new world. Here's if you don't go in there, you're going to lose. Here's what it takes to win, and here's what's going to be really hard about that. They didn't even have to say like anything about your ERP system. It's just pretty clear, like that's not going to do those things,
Yeah.
So, and you need something different. So, magic gifts is a term from from the world of film and narrative, it's the things that the rebel kind of guide gives to the hero. So like Obi-Wan gives Luke the lightsaber as an example of the magic gift. And so we are, as the seller, in a way that Obi-Wan, or I don't know if you saw the movie Moana, it's our grandmother, her name is Tala. She gives Moana these like magical tokens and sage advice. And so we are in that position to help them overcome these obstacles. Of course, these obstacles are, what a normal pitch might have started out with as the problems. Hey, you have this problem. But what we've done is we've built this context around it, which turned the problems into, they're not just sort of disembodied problems anymore. Now they're obstacles to something that's an emotional object of desire for the prospect.
Yeah, and I think after you have done this stage, so you have done your positioning correctly, there is like one more thing to be considered, and it's basically giving some kind of evidence that you can make the story come true to your client. So what would be the best way in order to do this?
Yeah, well, the best way, what's the best way to show somebody who you're saying, hey, like we're trying to, we're going to get you to this promised land. We're going to help you win in this new world. Well, it's to show them that you've already done that with somebody who's like them. So it's really the customer stories, the success stories, and particularly ones that are structured, not just like, hey, here's why we love this company. It's much more like, hey, here's how we saw this new world playing out. Here's, why it was tough, and then here's how they helped us. So in a way, the success stories are almost the pitch, but just now in the voice of the customer who's already been delivered or on the way to being delivered to that promised land.
Yeah, exactly. But I think at the same time, also companies that has just been established, they need stories, they need help with this one as well. So what should we do if we don't have any customers yet?
Yeah, sucks to be starting and not have any success stories. You do what you can. So first of all, if you had to, maybe you use testimonials of people who are, interested, or I don't know, that's not very convincing, but if it's the best you have. But yeah. I think even much better is, is there anything you can do to get some actual customer testimonials? So that could be running some beta program of your stuff that's very early and just making it very easy for a few companies to start using it, and start, might be very early, but just getting from them something like, yeah, this is going to really transform what we're doing. We haven't, we've used it for a little while, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It really, in order for the story to really shine, it really needs that stuff. And so it's a kind of call to action to the team to get some of that stuff early.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one other very important thing on getting stories to shine is the fact that everyone inside the company and actually outside of the company will tell the same story. And I think people understand what we mean by people telling the same story. But I think the big question for many people is that how do we get every person inside our company to tell the same story? Do you have ideas on that one?
So the number one factor in everyone telling the story is that the CEO is telling that story everywhere. So this is why in all of my engagements, I always ask the CEO to lead this, and not only just participate or sign off, but be the actual person who builds this with me. Of course, with support, there's support of that CEO from leaders in marketing and product and sales. But I really believe that, I talk about in that article about it as a sales narrative, but I really think about it as what I call strategic narrative, that it is the story everybody's telling. Though interesting and related to the line you have here on the screen, I really define the strategic narrative as the story inside the buyer's head that governs their actions. So what we're really trying to do is, if the buyer already sees urgency, then okay, we don't have to do much. But most of the cases, that post-chasm, from crossing the chasm, like mainstream buyer, they're not going to. And so we're trying to insert a new story into their head that's going to guide their act, that does point out the urgency, and that's going to guide them to act in a more urgent way. So CEO, product, sales, marketing, eventually community and customer, all telling the same story. That's how the movement happens. That's how the snowball starts accumulating and rolling.
Yeah, that's a great tip on that one. And actually, now we could pick up a question from our viewers. There was Jaakko asking actually this question, that what is your favorite book on storytelling? Which one would you recommend?
There's so many great books. It's funny, I was just looking at this one because I was just looking. So this is a book called The Art and Craft of Feature Writing. It's by William Blundell, who was an editor for a long time at the Wall Street Journal. And it's really a book about how to structure feature stories. It's not about how to write copy for a website or anything like that. But it is still, to me, the most wise book about how to structure narratives and what the pieces are. It's also really great about how to find ideas and how to take your observations in the world and build out stories from them.
Yeah, that's a great tip. A new book for me. Gotta order that one. And then actually, let's hit our last section of the Sales and Marketing Talk Show. And it's actually about our previous guest asking a question from you, and then you asking a question to our next guest. And I will read this question and a little bit info before the question itself. So this one is from Jone. Jone is a young brand strategist, and Jone's question for you is that you write a lot of text, and in my view, all of them have one common attribute: wealth. A wealth of source, a wealth of logical connection between them, and a wealth of rich language. This, I think, is the very core of what it means to be a great writer. It's the ability to gain knowledge from a lot of different sources and combine them in unique ways. So here's my questions. How do you keep track of all the knowledge you have? How would I, as a quite novice writer, begin the process of building my wealth of information and keep track of it? I think this is a brilliant question from Jone, and I'm waiting for your answer of this.
Yeah, so that's a great compliment. Is really flattering to hear that someone would say that. I don't have any system. I'm not a big note taker. I take notes in Gmail basically. So now there's all these tools like Rome Research has become very popular now. Just got funded. A lot of people are using to keep track of ideas and make the connections between ideas. One of the things that I like to do is I'll read something or watch a movie or something that's totally unrelated to what I do. And then I'll try to write a post like on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever that's kind of like in the spirit of that thing. So for instance, I was at the library and I took out these poetry books, and poetry is not something that I've really been interested in my life much. But I don't know, I just took them out and started reading them. And then I decided to write some poems on LinkedIn. It was like, oh, okay, that's weird, and it was just a lot of fun. So I think this making connections between things is really fun for me. And so I guess maybe find what's fun for you, whether that's making connections or whatever it is, and then just go down that path.
Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing that one. And now Andy's hard question to our next guest next week. We have actually Finnish sales coach Antti Paussu joining the show. So what should I ask from Antti?
Yeah, so I looked at Antti's Twitter feed, and one thing I saw, he said that I really loved. He said, if nobody is saying how dare you, then your price is too low. So I really like that advice. So you can just tell them that. But then one question I have, so I don't know if you know Dave Gerhardt. He's a marketer and posts on Twitter and LinkedIn a lot. And he posted this short tweet recently, like, hey, just send me the price by email. Basically, if you're in sales, so when I first started my consulting business, I talked to a friend who was really into who I respected as a salesperson. And one of his first couple of advice was never quote the price over email. And make sure there's a conversation first, and then you get to that place. And my question is for Antti, is that true? So should you never quote the price by email? Because there's the other side of it is, hey, why don't we just be clear about this and not waste each other's time? So I see both sides of it, and I'd love to hear Antti weigh in on that one.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I will ask it to Antti next week. But hey, thank you so much, Andy, for joining the show. Thank you for all listeners and viewers, and have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.